When a freak storm destroys the ship's perfect quantum core, the alien crew prepares to die. They have no heat, no gravity, and pirates are closing in. But the aliens forgot one thing: human engineer Mike doesn't rely on perfect math. He relies on a dirty, rusty, 500-year-old machine hidden in the basement. This is the story of why human backup plans are always better. Commander Zrex adjusted his crisp, silver uniform and stood taller. Today was a very important day for him and for the entire Galactic Alliance. He was the captain of the Galactic Pride, the most advanced spaceship ever built. The ship was not just a vessel, it was a masterpiece of science. The walls were pure white and smooth as glass. There were no buttons, no visible wires, and no sharp edges. Everything was controlled by thought and voice. It was perfect. Zrex turned to the group of visitors standing behind him. They were the High Council, the most powerful leaders in the galaxy. They had come to inspect the ship before its maiden voyage. Zrex smiled, his purple skin glowing under the soft LED lights. He gestured down the long, silent hallway. He explained that the ship used artificial intelligence for everything. It could fly itself, repair itself, and even cook perfect meals. The council members nodded in approval. They liked efficiency. They liked logic. The tour finally reached the most important room on the ship, the engine bay. Zrex pressed his hand against the door panel, and it slid open without a sound. The group walked inside. The room was massive, like a cathedral of technology. In the center of the room, floating in mid-air, was the quantum core. It was a sphere of swirling blue energy. It hummed so quietly that you could hear a pin drop. Zrex looked at it with love in his eyes. He told the council that this core provided infinite power. It was clean, safe, and had a failure rate of 0. It was statistically impossible for this machine to break. Suddenly, a loud, terrible noise shattered the peace. The council members jumped in fear. Zrex froze. The noise was ugly and rhythmic. It sounded like metal hitting metal. It was coming from the far corner of the pristine engine bay. Zrex felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him. He knew exactly who was making that noise. There was only one species in the galaxy loud enough and messy enough to disturb a quantum core. It was the human. Zrex marched toward the corner. There, surrounded by a pile of scrap metal and black pipes, was Chief Engineer Mike. Mike did not look like the rest of the crew. His uniform was stained with grease. He had a pencil behind his ear and a heavy welding torch in his hand. He was kneeling next to a large, ugly, blocky machine made of dark iron. It was bolted to the floor, and it looked like it belonged in a museum for ancient history. Engineer Mike. Zrex shouted over the noise. What are you doing? Mike flipped up his welding mask. His face was sweaty and dirty, but he was smiling. He patted the ugly iron machine. He explained that he was just finishing the installation of the backup system. He called it a diesel generator. He said it ran on liquid fuel and used small explosions to create electricity. Zrex stared at him in disbelief. He looked at the beautiful, floating quantum core, and then he looked at Mike's greasy iron box. The contrast was painful. Zrex tried to be patient. He explained to Mike, very slowly, that the quantum core was perfect. It would never run out of power. Therefore, adding a heavy, dirty, ancient machine was illogical. It was dead weight. It was a waste of space. Mike just shrugged his shoulders. He wiped his hands on a rag and said that nothing is ever perfect. He told the commander that humans have a saying, 2 is 1, and 1 is none. Mike believed that if you only have one power source, you actually have 0, because eventually, it will break. Zrex laughed. It was a cold, superior laugh. He turned to the High Council and apologized for the humans' strange behavior. He explained that humans were a young species. They were paranoid and afraid of the dark. They did not trust math. The council members chuckled. They looked at Mike with pity. They saw a primitive man clinging to his primitive toys. Zrex ordered Mike to clean up the mess, but he allowed the ugly generator to stay. He decided it would be a good lesson for the crew. It would serve as a reminder of how superior alien technology was compared to human junk. Zrex led the council out of the room, feeling confident and proud. Behind them, Mike didn't look embarrassed at all. He just checked the fuel level in his tank, tightened a bolt, and patted the cold iron of his machine. The ship was perfect, Zrex thought, but Mike knew better. Mike knew that the universe loved to break perfect things. 3 days had passed since the launch, and the Galactic Pride was cruising through the deep, empty blackness of the void sector. The ship was silent and smooth. It moved like a ghost. Inside the bridge, Commander Zrex sat in his floating captain's chair. He watched the stars glide past on the giant main view screen. Everything was running exactly according to the schedule. The artificial intelligence, which the crew called Mother, was handling the navigation, the life support, and the energy flow. Zrex felt very smug. He thought about Mike and his dirty, noisy machine in the basement. He had not heard a sound from the engine room in days. It proved that human backup plans were useless fears. The ship approached the edge of the purple nebula. It was a beautiful cloud of gas and electricity, stretching across the sky like a bruise. The ship sensors scanned the area 1,000 times a second. The computer reported that there was a 99.9% chance of a safe passage. Zrex liked those odds. In alien culture, if the math said it was safe, then it was safe. They did not believe in bad luck. They did not believe in chaos. Zrex gave the order to move forward at full speed. He wanted to show the galaxy how the quantum core could slice through a storm without shaking. Suddenly, the universe decided to ignore the math. A bolt of energy, thicker than a skyscraper and hotter than a sun, shot out from the center of the nebula. It was an ion surge, a rare freak of nature that the sensors had missed because it appeared out of nowhere. The bolt slammed into the side of the Galactic Pride. The impact did not cause an explosion. It did something much worse. The energy bolt acted like a giant EMP shock. It washed over the ship's hull and hit the delicate, perfect sensors of the quantum core. The core was designed for harmony and balance. It could not handle the shock. In the engine room, the beautiful blue sphere flickered once, turned a sickly shade of green, and then simply vanished. The magnetic containment field collapsed. Instantly, the ship died. The hum of the engines cut off. The bright white lights in the hallways turned pitch black. But the most terrifying thing was the gravity. The artificial gravity floor stopped working. Zrex and his crew were lifted out of their chairs, floating helplessly in the dark air. Then came the silence. A spaceship is never truly quiet, there is always the sound of fans, pumps, and energy humming. Now, there was nothing. The only sound Zrex could hear was the terrified beating of his own 2 hearts and the gasps of his crew members floating in the dark. Report. Zrex screamed, his voice cracking. Mother. Status report. There was no answer. The AI was dead. The screens were black mirrors. Zrex tried to tap his wrist communicator to call the engine room, but the device was dead too. He pushed himself off the ceiling and floated toward the manual emergency locker. He grabbed a glow stick, cracked it, and a dim green light filled the bridge. The faces of his alien crew were pale with terror. They were tapping furiously on dead glass panels, waiting for the computer to tell them what to do. They had never trained for a total blackout because the manual said a total blackout was impossible. The temperature began to drop. Without the quantum core powering the heaters, the cold of space was seeping through the metal walls. Zrex could see his breath misting in the green light. He knew the math. Without power, the air recyclers were off. They had maybe 1 hour of oxygen left before they all suffocated. Then they would freeze into ice statues. Zrex felt a crushing weight of despair. His perfect ship had become a metal coffin. Logic told him there was no solution. The quantum core required a massive computer reboot to restart, but the computer needed power to turn on. It was a loop of death. He floated near the door, ready to give up. But then, through the floorboards, he felt a vibration. It was faint at first, barely a tickle against his boots. Then, a sound echoed through the metal skeleton of the ship. It was not the smooth hum of alien tech. It was a rough, coughing sound. Ku-chug. Ku-chug. Vroom. The ship shuddered violently. The smooth floor vibrated. Zrex's eyes went wide. Somewhere deep in the belly of the dead ship, something had just woken up. It sounded angry. It sounded ugly. It sounded like the only hope they had left. Commander Zrex pulled himself through the dark corridors of the Galactic Pride using the emergency handrails. The ship was usually silent, but now it was filled with a terrifying roar. The noise grew louder with every meter he traveled. It vibrated through his chest and rattled his teeth. To an alien who had only ever known the soft hum of quantum energy, this new sound was violent. It sounded like a beast was trapped inside the walls, trying to chew its way out. Zrex was terrified, but he had no choice. He had to reach the engine room to see if the ship was exploding. The air in the hallway was getting colder by the minute. Zrex could feel his fingers going numb. He finally reached the heavy blast doors of the engine room. Without power, the automatic sensors were dead, so he had to use the manual wheel. He grabbed the cold metal wheel and pulled with all his strength. It groaned and slowly turned. With a final heave, Zrex pushed the door open and floated inside. He immediately gagged. The air inside was thick and gray. It did not smell like a spaceship. It smelled like burning chemicals and hot grease. Through the haze of smoke, Zrex saw a scene that defied all logic. The beautiful quantum core was dark and lifeless, floating like a dead stone in the center of the room. But in the corner, the useless pile of iron was alive. The diesel generator was shaking violently. It was dancing on its bolts. The pistons were pumping up and down so fast they were a blur. Black smoke was puffing out of an exhaust pipe that Mike had rigged to the ship's ventilation shaft. The noise was deafening. Mike was standing next to the beast. He was wearing heavy magnetic boots that kept him stuck to the floor while gravity was gone. He wore large earmuffs to protect his ears from the noise. He looked wild. His face was covered in black soot, and he was holding a large plastic jug of yellow liquid. He poured the liquid into a funnel on the side of the shaking machine. He looked up and saw the commander floating near the ceiling. Mike didn't salute. He just grinned, showing his white teeth against his dirty face, and gave a thumbs-up sign. Zrex floated down and grabbed a pipe to steady himself. He looked at the machine with wide eyes. He could not understand how it was working. The ship's computer was dead. The navigation was dead. The physics calculations were gone. How could this machine generate power without a computer to tell it what to do? He watched the belt spin. He watched the metal gears grind. It was crude. It was dirty. It was inefficient. But it was moving. Suddenly, the lights overhead flickered. They did not come on with the smooth, instant brightness of the main system. These were the emergency halogen bulbs. They buzzed and glowed with a warm, yellow light. Then, the ventilation fans groaned into life. Zrex felt a gentle breeze on his face as the smoke began to clear. The heater vents clicked, and warm air began to flow into the freezing room. The ship was waking up. It wasn't the powerful, godlike ship it was before. It was now a loud, smelly, shaking vessel, but it was alive. Mike walked over to a control panel on the wall. He pointed to a needle on an analog gauge. It was vibrating in the green zone. He pulled his earmuffs down and shouted to be heard over the engine. He explained to Zrex that the generator didn't need a computer brain. It used compression and fire. As long as there was fuel and air, the engine would run until the end of time. It was too stupid to know the ship was broken, so it just kept working. Zrex stared at the ugly machine. A few hours ago, he had called it garbage. He had wanted to throw it into space. Now, the heat from that machine was the only thing stopping his blood from freezing. He realized that the human definition of better was different from the alien definition. For aliens, better meant smarter. For humans, better meant harder to kill. Zrex was about to thank Mike, but suddenly, a red light started spinning on the wall console. A harsh alarm cut through the noise of the engine. The radar screen, now powered by the dirty electricity of the generator, blinked to life. A single red dot appeared on the edge of the grid. It was moving fast, coming straight for them. The computer identified the vessel's signature immediately. It was a pirate raider-class ship. The scavengers had detected the energy surge from the storm and were coming to pick the bones of the Galactic Pride. Zrex looked at Mike with fear returning to his eyes. They had power, but the main computer was still fried. The ship had a heart, but it had no brain to fight back. The emergency lights on the bridge bathed the room in a dim, orange glow. The radar screen, which was now running off the dirty power from Mike's generator, let out a slow, rhythmic ping. With every ping, the red dot representing the pirate ship got closer. It was not a friendly visit. A message appeared on the main screen, sent from the pirate captain. It was short and brutal. It demanded that the Galactic Pride lower its shields and prepare to be boarded. If they resisted, the pirates would blow them into dust. Commander Zrex stared at the message with a heavy heart. He looked at his tactical officer, a young alien named Glip, and gave the order to return fire. Glip's fingers flew across the glass console, tapping rapidly. But the console remained dark. He tapped harder, panic rising in his chest. He looked up at the commander with wide, watery eyes. He reported that the weapons system was online and had power, but the targeting computer was completely fried. In the Galactic Alliance, weapons were complex. They used advanced sensors to calculate the speed of the enemy, the curve of space, and the heat of the stars. The computer usually did 1,000,000 math problems in 1 second to ensure a perfect hit. Without the computer to do the math, the laser cannons were just heavy metal tubes that could not aim. Zrex slammed his fist onto his chair. This was the nightmare of every modern captain. They had energy, they had shields, and they had massive cannons, but they were blind. It was like having a sword but being unable to see the enemy. Zrex looked out the window. The pirate ship, a jagged vessel painted with skulls, was visible now. It was charging its weapons. Zrex took a deep breath. Logic dictated only one course of action. If they fought, they would miss every shot and then die. If they surrendered, they might live as slaves. He opened his mouth to order the surrender. "Don't touch that radio," a rough voice said from the doorway. Zrex turned around. Chief Engineer Mike walked onto the bridge. He was still wearing his magnetic boots, which clanked loudly on the metal floor. He was holding a large, red metal lever in his hand. Zrex shook his head sadly. He told Mike that it was over. He explained that the brain of the ship was dead, and without the targeting software, the weapons were useless. Zrex added that no living creature could calculate the trajectory of a laser in deep space manually. It was statistically impossible. Mike didn't listen to the statistics. He walked over to a smooth, white wall panel located behind the captain's chair. Zrex had never paid attention to that panel, he assumed it covered wiring. Mike jammed the red lever into a small crack in the wall and pulled hard. There was a loud crack as the seamless panel popped open. Dust drifted into the air. Inside the wall was a hidden compartment that looked like it hadn't been opened in 100 years. Slowly, a mechanical seat slid out of the wall on rusty rails. It did not look like the sleek, floating chairs of the bridge. It was made of cold steel and leather. In front of the seat was not a touch screen, but a physical joystick made of rubber and iron. And instead of a digital monitor, there was a thick glass window with a red crosshair painted right in the center. It looked like a gunner's seat from an ancient war movie. Zrex stared at the archaic device in horror. He asked Mike what that primitive chair was doing on his advanced spaceship. Mike sat down in the leather seat and buckled a physical strap across his chest. He grabbed the joystick with his greasy hands. He explained that this was the manual override. It didn't use computers or wires. It used chains, gears, and hydraulic oil to physically move the giant laser turrets outside. Zrex argued that this was madness. He shouted that the human eye was too slow. He said they needed the computer to lock onto the enemy. Mike ignored him. He flipped a toggle switch, and a loud clunk echoed through the ship as the laser cannons disconnected from the dead computer and locked into the manual gears. Mike looked through the glass sight. He wasn't looking at data or numbers. He was just looking at the pirate ship with his own 2 eyes. He grinned. He said that computers are great for math, but sometimes you just need to point and shoot. The pirate ship, a jagged vessel named the Bone Crusher, moved closer for the kill. The pirate captain, a reptilian warlord with a cybernetic eye, laughed as he watched the drifting Galactic Pride. He knew the Federation ships were helpless without their main computers. To ensure his victory, the pirate captain slammed his hand onto a large button on his console. This activated the electronic jamming field. It was a powerful wave of invisible noise designed to scramble any targeting software in the area. Usually, this was the ultimate defense. Any missile or laser guided by a computer would become confused, spin in circles, and shut down. The pirates waited for the Federation ship to surrender, confident that their high-tech jamming made them invincible. Inside the bridge of the Galactic Pride, Chief Engineer Mike did not even notice the jamming field. He was not looking at a computer screen that could be scrambled. He was looking through a piece of thick, clear glass. He gripped the rubber joystick with both hands. It was heavy and stiff. When he pushed the stick to the left, the floor of the bridge vibrated. He could hear the hydraulic pumps groaning outside the hull. Slowly, clumsily, the giant laser turret on the roof of the ship began to turn. It did not move with the smooth, robotic precision of a machine. It moved with the jerky, human adjustments of a man trying to aim a heavy gun. Mike squinted one eye and lined up the painted red crosshair on the glass with the pirate ship. He took a deep breath and held it. He squeezed the trigger. Boom! The entire ship rocked backward from the recoil. A massive bolt of red plasma shot out of the turret. It streaked across the darkness of space, and missed the pirate ship by a mile. The shot disappeared harmlessly into the stars. Commander Zrex let out a high-pitched whimper of terror. He floated over to Mike, grabbing the back of the metal chair. He shouted that it was impossible to hit a moving target without trajectory calculations. He begged Mike to stop before he made the pirates angry. Mike just grunted and ignored the panic. He explained that he was sighting in. He watched where the red bolt had traveled. It had gone too high and too far to the left. His brain made the calculations that a computer usually made, but he did it with instinct. He pulled the heavy joystick down and twisted it to the right. He waited for the ship to roll slightly in the drift of space. He wasn't aiming at where the pirate ship was, he was aiming at where the pirate ship would be in 2 seconds. To the alien commander, this looked like guessing. To the human engineer, it was just leading the target. On the pirate ship, the sensors went wild. The computer screamed a warning, projectile detected. But the pirate captain was confused. His jamming field was at maximum power. The enemy computer should be blind. The pirate AI tried to predict the next shot to activate the auto shields, but it failed. Computer algorithms predict logical patterns based on math. But Mike was not using math. He was using gut feeling. The advanced pirate computer could not predict the chaotic, imperfect movements of a human hand. The system froze, unsure of how to defend against such a primitive attack. Mike squeezed the trigger again. Thump thump thump. 3 bolts of red energy flew out in a rapid rhythm. The first shot clipped the edge of the pirate's shield, making it flare bright blue. The second shot smashed the shield completely. The third shot flew straight and true, slamming directly into the pirate ship's engine cluster. An explosion blossomed in silence, lighting up the dark void with orange fire. The pirate ship spun out of control, leaking blue gas into the vacuum of space. The terrifying predator had just been punched in the nose by a blind victim. Realizing they were fighting a crazy opponent who didn't play by the rules of electronic warfare, the pirates panicked. They turned their broken ship around and engaged their emergency thrusters, fleeing into the darkness. On the bridge of the Galactic Pride, silence returned. Zrex stared at the retreating enemy, his mouth hanging open. He looked at the smoking barrel of the laser cannon on the screen, and then at Mike. Mike simply let go of the joystick, rubbed his sore shoulder, and unbuckled the strap. The dumb weapon had done what the smartest computer in the galaxy failed to do. The battle was over as quickly as it had begun. The Galactic Pride drifted silently in the empty void, the only sound being the distant, rhythmic thumping of the diesel generator deep in the ship's belly. Commander Zrex stood in the center of the bridge, staring out into the starfield where the pirates had fled. His purple hands were shaking slightly. He looked around at his crew. They were shaken and terrified, but they were alive. The ship's hull was intact. The air was still breathable. According to all his logical calculations and probability charts, they should have been destroyed. A disabled ship against a war cruiser was a 0% survival scenario. Yet, here they were, breathing and safe, all because of a greasy human and a rusty lever. Mike slowly unbuckled himself from the gunner's seat. He groaned as he stretched his back. The manual chair had no cushioning, and the recoil of the lasers had bruised his shoulder. He looked like a mess. His face was smeared with oil, his uniform was torn, and he smelled like exhaust fumes. In the pristine, white, high-tech environment of the alien bridge, Mike looked like a caveman who had wandered into a laboratory. But as he stood up, no one looked at him with disgust anymore. The alien crew members looked at him with awe. They looked at the heavy iron joystick as if it were a holy artifact. Zrex walked over to Mike. He moved slowly, his posture less rigid than usual. He ran his long fingers over the scratched metal of the manual control panel. For his entire life, Zrex had been taught that technology was a straight line. You started with stone tools, then you built machines, then computers, and finally, you reached the age of quantum perfection. To go backward, to use manual gears and combustion engines, was considered a failure of intelligence. It was seen as de-evolution. But today, the backward technology had defeated the advanced technology. Engineer Mike, Zrex said softly, his voice full of genuine curiosity. I do not understand. Our quantum core is the pinnacle of science. Our targeting computers can calculate 1,000,000 variables. Why do your people insist on keeping these primitive things? Why do you burden the ship with heavy iron and dirty fuel? Mike reached into his pocket and pulled out a crinkled pouch of instant coffee. He tore it open and poured the powder directly into his mouth, chewing the dry caffeine. He swallowed and smiled. He explained the concept of Murphy's Law to the commander. He told Zrex that humans evolved on a dangerous planet where things went wrong all the time. Aliens built their technology assuming that everything would work perfectly. Humans built their technology assuming that everything would break. You build for the best day, Mike said, tapping the sleek computer console that was finally rebooting. We build for the worst day. A computer is like a glass sword. It is very sharp, but if you drop it, it shatters. This, Mike patted the iron joystick, is a rock. It's not sharp, and it's not pretty. But if you drop a rock, it's still a rock. And you can still hit someone with it. Zrex nodded slowly. The logic was strange, but he could not argue with the results. Perfection was fragile. Ruggedness was survival. Just then, the main lights on the bridge flickered and turned bright white. The hum of the ventilation system smoothed out. The main computer announced that the quantum core had rebooted and was back online. The crisis was over. The ship was perfect again. Zrex looked at the pristine main screen, then down at the dirty manual lever. He made a decision. He turned to his first officer and ordered that the manual override chair be left exactly where it was. He did not want it hidden behind the wall panel again. Then, he turned to Mike. "Engineer Mike," Zrex said, standing tall. "I formerly believed that efficiency was the highest goal. I was wrong. Survival is the highest goal. I am authorizing the construction of your Plan C that you mentioned earlier." Mike grinned, a mischievous sparkle in his eyes. "Are you sure, Commander? Plan C involves a lot of duct tape, a localized EMP device, and a shotgun." Zrex did not flinch. He simply clasped his hands behind his back. "I do not know what a shotgun is, and I am terrified to find out. But if it works as well as the engine and the stick, I want 2 of them installed immediately." As the Galactic Pride engaged its warp drive and blurred into the stars, it was no longer just a masterpiece of alien science. It was something stronger. It was a ship with a human backup plan. And in a dangerous galaxy, that made it the most powerful ship in the universe.